This is our list of the top 10 strongest swordsmen in One Piece. Number 10. Vista. Vista of the Flower Swords used to be the 5th Division commander of the Whitebeard Pirates and the strongest swordsman in the entire crew. Vista is a very skilled fighter. He was a member of Whitebeard's crew even during the time of Gold D. Roger. His weapons of choice are twin sabers with purple hilts. He fought Dracule MIHAWK during Marineford and was able to hold his own, even deflecting one of MIHAWK's long-range attacks without much trouble. MIHAWK not only knew about Vista's reputation, but he also wanted to see him use his sword skills. Both of them decided to stop fighting, which means that not even MIHAWK could easily get rid of the pirate, even if he wanted to. Vista is also very good at armament hockey and observation hockey. And for some reason, he seems to hate Usopp's dad, Yasopp. Number 9. Law. Trafalgar D. Water Law is the captain of the Heart Pirates and user of the Ope Ope no Mi. Although his Devil Fruit abilities are a bit more infamous, his combat potential wouldn't be anywhere near as high as it is without his swordsmanship. His weapon of choice is KIKOKU, an unranked cursed sword. It's a massive odachi, or Japanese greatsword, with a fur-trimmed handle, purple grip, and yellow pommel. This thing is so big that Law usually has to carry it on his shoulder, or even resort to having Beppo lug it around for him. As far as we know, the sword itself doesn't have any special powers or abilities, but works perfectly with Law's Devil Fruit. You'd think that such a surgically precise fighting style would require a more controllable blade, but Law tends to have his reasons. Law's sword slashes can't travel distances. They just cut, while his rune manipulation provides an extended range. With this sort of spatial slicing, he can cut people apart without harming them and manipulate the pieces from there as he so pleases. But even without his Devil Fruit abilities, Law is proficient enough to handle someone like Smoker, who is Vice Admiral level. Law's go-to move is Amputate, which lets him cut a target without hurting them. His sword doesn't even need to touch a target for this to happen. With Radio Knife, Law can take this move to the next level. This one puts electricity into his sword. Aside from shocking the target, it also stops them from reattaching body parts. This makes up for any counter abilities an opponent might have. Law can increase his precision by aiming with a reticle over his blade or hand and connect while extending his blade. When his sword hits something, he uses injection shot to fire it like a gun, doing a lot of damage to a certain area. He can also do this from a distance, and even with his arm cut off, Law can still use his sword well because of his Thurbin move, which uses his blade like a buzzsaw. And now that Law has awakened his Devil Fruit, he can do even more impressive things. Anesthesia lets Law code his sword in a miniature version of his room called K-Room. With it, he can pierce through anything without causing harm. Even though this doesn't seem like much on its own, it might be the best way to stop Haki in all of One Piece. When Law uses Shock Will, he can create an electric current that can cook an opponent from the inside out. Even someone as ridiculously durable as Big Mom was no match for it. Puncture Will sees Law pierce a down target from above, while KIKOKU extends downward, phasing through everything in its way. Law then sends out a huge shockwave that can cause every solid thing his blade has cut to implode in a terrible way. Using his sword, Law has been able to take down Kinemon, one of Wano's greatest swordsmen. He was able to break Tashigi's sword with one slash. He beat Treble of the Don Quixote pirates. He cut a meteor in half. And most impressively, he killed Virgo, who was covered in full-body armament hockey, by slicing him in half along with Caesar's whole lab and the many mountains around it. So the next time someone questions if Law's a real swordsman or not, send them this video. Number 8. ZORO. The former pirate hunter Roronoa ZORO is the first mate of the Straw Hat Pirates and was the first person to join. ZORO's swordsmanship training began in childhood at the Ishin Dojo of Shimotsuki Village. Even when he was young, he could beat his adult peers. ZORO's signature three-sword style is the uniquely unorthodox wielding of 3 blades, one in each hand and a third in his mouth. Before losing to his childhood rival Kuina's one-sword style 2001 times, ZORO mostly used two-sword style. But after she died and he received her sword and dreamed of becoming the greatest swordsman, he developed his three-sword style. Throughout the series, ZORO has used a lot of different swords. These days, ZORO's weapons of choice are Wado Ichimonji, Sandai Kitetsu, and Enma. Wado Ichimonji is one of the 21 Great Blades and was forged by Shimotsuki Kozaburo. Kitetsu is a great blade and cursed sword forged by the former shogun of Wano, Kozuki Sukiyaki. Enma, like Wado Ichimonji, is also one of the 21 Great Blades forged by Shimotsuki Kozaburo and was formerly wielded by Kozuki Oden. ZORO is one of the very few characters in the series with access to all 3 forms of Haki: observation, armament, and conquerors. When Zoro first started sailing, he was able to take on Dracule MIHAWK himself. Even though he lost, MIHAWK was sure that Zoro would be able to challenge him for the title of greatest swordsman one day. Not long after that, MIHAWK would train Zoro for 2 years. On Kuraigana Island, Zoro ran into a huge group of human drills, smart monkeys that could accurately mimic any martial fighting style, like Zoro's or MIHAWK's. Even MIHAWK couldn't hide his surprise when Zoro beat them. Even before that, Zoro showed that he was very good at fighting large groups of enemies when he beat 100 bounty hunters from Crocodile's Baroque works, all by himself, even though they used different strategies. On Punk Hazard, he achieved the legendary feat of cutting off the head of a huge dragon with only his one sword style. Zoro has always had a lot of physical strength, but his ability to resist the force of gravity from Admiral FUJITORA was especially impressive. Zoro is also incredibly resourceful. Even when he doesn't have his signature weapons, he can use almost any blade to kill. Also, like the human drills, he can almost perfectly copy the sword styles of others without being shown how to do it, which is how he got the FOXFIRE style from Kinemon. Eventually, Zoro was successful in creating King of Hell 3-sword style, an even better version of his signature fighting style. By using his armament and Conqueror's Haki to their fullest, Zoro was able to make all of his techniques more powerful and have a wider range. The most important part of the skill is his sword Enma, and that's because of Enma's special ability, which allows it to excessively release its wielder's Haki, doing a lot more damage than intended. The sword was said to be so strong that it could cut through to the bottom of hell. When Zoro tried it out for the first time, he cut off a part of the coast when all he wanted to do was cut a tree. For a less skilled swordsman, just holding the blade would use up all their Haki and kill them. If all that wasn't enough, the strange Haki it gave off when it was in Zoro's hands scared both the Yonko's Big Mom and Kaido. And with it, Zoro was able to leave a permanent scar on Kaido's body. It was also used to beat King, whose Lunarian body was otherwise almost impossible to harm. If Zoro manages to turn Enma into a permanent black blade, it could become a supreme grade sword. The 9-sword style is the furthest extension of Zoro's spirit and will. It gives him the illusion of having 2 more heads and 4 more arms, which lets him use a total of 9 blades. In this form, Zoro's power is 3 times as strong as it was before. It is also Zoro's rarest sword technique, as it took more than 12 years for it to make its way back into the story after the time skip. Number 7. FUJITORA. FUJITORA is an admiral of the Marines and a believer in humane justice. His dough fruit, the Zushi Zushinomi, is a paramecia type that allows him to create and control forces of gravity. His weapon of choice is an unnamed katana in a cane of unknown grade, which he tends to wield in a reverse grip style. Despite his blindness, FUJITORA is more keenly aware than most on account of his masterful Haki use. Because his observation Haki is so advanced, he's able to see living beings through his mind's eye. Not only that, but he can read and hear the true thoughts and emotions of others. This makes tricking or catching him by surprise very hard. As for armament Haki, he tends to extend it to his sword. FUJITORA mostly channels his Dofu powers to his sword as well. This makes the simple act of clashing blades with him incredibly difficult. Not to mention, his range can span entire islands. He can also use reverse gravity to repel attacks. He's the only admiral with a paramecia type devil fruit, and he's definitely the strongest swordsman in the Marines. Number 6. RAYLEIGH. The Dark King Silver's RAYLEIGH was once the first mate of the Roger Pirates and the right hand of the Pirate King. RAYLEIGH's weapon of choice is a long double-edged straight sword with a round pommel and cross hilt. He's alternatively been known to use a katana as well. Possessing no devil fruit abilities of his own, RAYLEIGH's legendary status among history's finest came as a result of his masterful Haki use and swordsmanship. RAYLEIGH has access to all 3 forms of Haki. With observation Haki, he can sense hundreds of creatures on an island at a time, along with their relative power levels, and detect specific targets. His armament Haki is capable of advanced feats such as emission, where he doesn't even need to touch something to repel it, and channeling, where he can imbue his Haki into something and destroy it from the inside out. Then we have his Conqueror's Haki, which is so potent that even in his late 70s, RAYLEIGH could have knocked out all 100,000 of the new Fishman pirates. He can also infuse himself or objects with his Conqueror's Haki. The simple act of him drawing his sword like this was enough to make the Yonko Blackbeard retreat. RAYLEIGH has been capable of some truly ridiculous feats, such as swimming from outside the calm belt all the way to Amazon Lily. He did this all while killing many sea kings with his bare hands and keeping both of them. unlike a certain someone coming up. While protecting the Straw Hats, he was able to clash swords on equal footing against Admiral Kizaru, and even managed to cut his face. He's also displayed the ability to create compressed slashes of air. Although we don't have a ton of sword fights from him, the sheer fact that Rayleigh is a figure of such legendary status and is never seen without a sword should say more than enough about his skills. And again, this man is 78 years old. Imagine him in his prime. Number 5. Oden. Kosuke Oden was the former daimyo of Kuri, leader of the 9 Red Scabbards, 2nd Division commander of the Whitebeard Pirates, and later, member of the Roger Pirates. His signature Oden two-sword style was a dual-wielding form focused on the use of advanced armament haki and strength, which increased its cutting power to insane levels. As a baby, Oden threw a grown woman to the ground. At 2 years old, he was fast enough to catch 2 rabbits at once. At 4 years old, he destroyed a bear by throwing a boulder at it. At 8 years old, he got drunk and brawled with many grown men. At 9 years old, Oden waged war against Wano's Yakuza. At 10 years old, he went to and trained in prison. At 14 years old, he curved a river. At 15 years old, he regularly brought women into his late-night harem. This resulted in the Harem War, a fight that saw the many samurai men in those women's lives take up arms against the young heir. This event even included the Hyogoro clan in their prime. The casualties caused by Oden alone were staggering. At 18 years old, Oden defeated the Mountain God. This was a divine creature of Wano country legend that easily devoured a village's worth of people, wiped out 25% of the flower capital, and took down a young Kienmon. And although Oden split the beast in half, the cut was so clean and precise that he managed to avoid killing it, as well as all the people it swallowed. In just one night, he single-handedly defeated all of Kuri's criminals, including Ashura Doji. Oden's weapons of choice were Ame no Hawakiri, which could slice through the heavens, and Enma, which could cut through the bottom of hell, both of which were among the 21 great grade swords. Oden was a master of all 3 forms of haki. Although he lacks any especially noteworthy feats of observation or conqueror's haki, armament haki is where Oden's prowess is made especially clear. Even as a child, Oden was able to easily wield the haki-sapping Enma as if it were as light as a feather, which Zoro struggles to handle even now. At 29 years old, Oden was able to clash against Whitebeard and his Murakumogiri, one of the 12 strongest swords in the One Piece world. His Togen Shirataki technique was so strong that it could match the force of Whitebeard's Quake Punch. We are talking about the strongest Paramecia type power in the world, and that was when Whitebeard was in his prime. After he took down several of the Roger Pirates, both Gaban and Rayleigh were prepared to work together against him in a 2-on-1 fight. He even survived a direct blow from Goldie Roger with only minor injuries. After spending so many years with 2 of the strongest pirate crews in history, Oden returned to Wano more powerful than he'd ever been before. At 39 years old, Oden managed to fight against Kaido on equal footing. During their final fight, Oden permanently scarred Kaido's near-invincible body in its most durable form. Even 20 years after his death, Kaido still recognized Oden to be the strongest samurai, and the one who could never be matched. Number 4. Shanks. Red-haired Shanks is the boss of the red-haired pirates and a Yonko that has maintained his position despite the rapid changing of times. Having been with the Roger Pirates since he was a baby, Shanks has been around legends his entire life, and it clearly shows in his abilities and notoriety. His weapon of choice is a large single-edged saber with a green hilt and circular handguard known as Gryphon. He can apparently coat this mysterious weapon in a fiery aura. Shanks is yet another swordsman on our list with access to all 3 types of haki. Shanks' observation haki spans several miles. His armament haki, when infused with his sword, is strong enough to repel the magma-powered fist of a then Admiral Akainu. We're talking about the strongest admiral, using one of the most offensively powerful devil fruits of all time, and Shanks handled him without an issue. But Shanks is best known for his incredible conqueror's haki. With it, he was able to knock out dozens of Whitebeard's men without even lifting a finger. Even Whitebeard's ship, the Moby Dick, which had sailed the New World for more than 30 years, began to break down in his presence. And like Rayleigh, Shanks could have knocked out all 100,000 members of the new Fishman pirates with it. We are talking about haki levels that, when angrily released from many miles away, was enough to paralyze Admiral Ryokugu and force his retreat from Wano. Even Jinbei and Yamato, 2 of the greatest haki users in the world, who've seen plenty of other impressive masters, were very impressed by Shanks' potency. Shanks' conqueror's haki is even capable of something called observation killing. an advanced technique that lets him control his own presence and stop others from seeing into the future with their own haki. According to flashbacks, Shanks previously preferred to hold his sword in his left hand, which he unfortunately lost. But that didn't stop him from absolutely destroying the Kid Pirates with a single swing of his sword. With the technique he learned from our next entry on our list, Shanks took down 2 members of the worst generation. He made this the most notable appearance of a character with a 3 billion berry bounty. In the past, Shanks was apparently a rival of Dracule MIHAWK's, and the two engaged in daily duels against one another. To cross blades with MIHAWK is one thing. To do it regularly implies not only extreme proficiency, but an ability to keep him entertained. And even after losing an arm, Shanks was able to clash blades with Whitebeard and his Murakumo Giri, one of the 12 supreme grade swords. And in doing so, they split the heavens above. So how did Blackbeard manage to scar his face? Number 3. Gold D. Roger. The Pirate King Gold D. Roger was captain of the Roger Pirates and remains one of the most notorious names in all of One Piece. Roger's weapon of choice was a slightly curved cutlass named Ace. As one of the 12 supreme grade swords, Roger used the weapon to deadly effect during some of the most world-shaking events of all time. Roger never had a devil fruit, and instead relied on his masterful use of all 3 haki types. From what we've seen, he was able to pull off advanced techniques like Conqueror's Haki Infusion and Armament Haki Emission. Even while he suffered from an incurable disease, Roger was able to fight against Whitebeard and his forces without rest for 3 days and 3 nights. Not even Oden could withstand his Kamusari technique and was easily launched a great distance away. Anything less than a prime Whitebeard level strike wouldn't even be able to collide with his blade. Number 2. Shimotsuki Ryuma. The legendary sword god Ryuma was a direct ancestor of Zoro's that lived during Wano's Country of Gold era. Even now, he remains one of its most respected figures centuries after his death. His fighting style was like a mix of Kenjutsu and Batojutsu. Ryuma's weapon of choice was Shusui, one of the 21 great swords. Shusui today is considered to be the national treasure of Wano. But what's truly special about the blade is the fact that it is one of only 2 permanent black swords that we have seen in the series thus far. The level of armament Haki Ryuma would have needed to pull this off is ridiculous. Shusui was designed to drastically increase his wielder's damage potential and destructive power, but using it without experience could be troublesome as, according to ZORO, Shusui has a bit of a temper. It's also a bit on the heavier side, so it requires a tremendous amount of strength to be properly controlled. Ryuma was also referred to as a king and said to possess the world's greatest warrior soul, so I wouldn't be surprised if he also possessed Conqueror's Haki. One of his legendary feats was the decapitation of a dragon in a single slash. And given his respective time period, this was unlikely to have been an artificial dragon like the one Zoro killed. As a zombie, Ryuma wasn't nearly as capable as he was in his youth. Not only was he pretty old by the time he died, but his body was rotten and influenced by Brook's shadow. But even in this far weaker state, Ryuma's physical strength was equal to that of a Thriller Bark level Zoro. For the people of Wano to recognize Ryuma as the sword god hundreds of years after his death, and even while having figures like Oden, means that this guy was the best the land of the samurai has ever produced. That alone says more than enough to me. Number 1. Dracule MIHAWK. The former marine hunter, and later, former warlord of the sea, and now, Cross Guild Chief Officer, Dracule Hawkeye's MIHAWK is the strongest swordsman in the world. With the abolishment of the 7 warlord system, MIHAWK's bounty rose to a staggering 3,590,000,000 belly. That's higher than both Luffy's and Buggy's, and they're Yonkos. His fighting style may be broken down into 2 categories: Strong Blade and Gentle Blade. With Strong Blade, MIHAWK can casually split giant icebergs from major distances. With Gentle Blade, he could deflect bullets with only a slight touch of his sword. MIHAWK's weapon of choice is Yoru, a cross-shaped Kriegsmesser and one of the 12 supreme great swords. It is also one of only 2 permanent black blades we've seen in the series, and is certainly the strongest. MIHAWK also uses a cross-shaped knife named Kokatana that he keeps as a pendant, which despite its small size, is more than enough for him to take on even decently skilled swordsmen. Unlike most of our list, MIHAWK's use of Haki has been pretty subtle for the most part, but he's clearly very capable when it comes to armament Haki since he turned his sword black forever with it. When it comes to observation Haki, MIHAWK's eyesight is incredible, and is even able to keep up with the movements of Luffy's Gear 2nd with ease and strike with extreme precision. Even before Roger's death, MIHAWK fought endlessly until he ran out of worthy challengers. He fought legendary battles against Shanks in the past, only stopping because Shanks lost an arm and wouldn't be able to provide the same level of enjoyment and challenge. He single-handedly destroyed Don Krieg's fleet of 50 ships and 5,000 men. It was to the point where Don Krieg had to assume that MIHAWK had Devil Fruit powers. During Marineford, MIHAWK fought against Vista and Crocodile and emerged completely unharmed. When Zoro clashed with MIHAWK's clone, as Hawk, he noted that upon closer inspection, the artificial life form actually possessed a bit of humanity, which according to him, MIHAWK doesn't have at all. Now, check out our video on every admiral in One Piece history for even more strong characters.